We got there on a Friday evening, set up our tents right by the water, and kicked things off with burgers on the campfire. We had a few beers, shared some long overdue laughs, and just soaked in the peace under a sky full of stars. It was perfect. The next morning, we decided to explore. We didn't have a real map, just a desire to wander. We followed trails that eventually just disappeared into the undergrowth. Jordan was busy snapping photos of weird mushrooms and wildflowers, while Alex was going on about the possibility of cryptids in the northeast. Classic Alec. After a few hours, the dense forest suddenly opened up, revealing a hidden pond. It was maybe 80 yards across, and on the far bank stood this dilapidated, ancient-looking cabin. The pine boards were bleached silver from years of weather. The roof was caving in with rusted tin patches, and a single shutter was just flapping loosely in the breeze. The door was hanging wide open, practically inviting us in. Of course, our curiosity got the better of us. We had to check it out. The moment we stepped inside, the air hit us this thick, musty smell of mildew and decay. Dust motes were dancing in the dim light, filtering through the cracks. In the center of the single room was a rickety wooden bench, covered in deep gouges and what looked like faded crimson smears. The walls were even weirder. Iron spikes were driven into the wood at different heights, some of them twisted out of shape. Alex tried to lighten the mood, joking it was probably just an old fisherman's hut for gutting fish. I wasn't convinced. Jordan took a few photos of the bench, but I just hung back by the door, feeling this intense urge to leave. The relief I felt stepping back outside was immediate, but just as we were walking away, Jordan stumbled on something near the cabin's foundation. His boot had caught on a piece of buried metal. We started digging with our hands in a trekking pole, and what we unearthed was, bizarrely, was a conical helmet made of bronze, now oxidized a sickly green. It had these crude, T-shaped slits for eyes, like it was carved with some primitive tool. The thing was heavy, dense. It felt ancient, ceremonial, like something out of a history book about forgotten warriors. What the hell is this? Alex mothered, picking it up. He started guessing? Viking? Some kind of native ritual mask. Jordan tried wiping some of the dirt off, but I couldn't shake the feeling that something was watching us through those empty eye slits. Then Alex, being his usual self, went to put it on. "Don't," I snapped, probably a little too quickly. The vibe was just wrong. We ended up just lightly covering it with dirt again and started the hike back to our camp. The whole mood had shifted. No one was joking around anymore. That night, huddled around the fire, we kept throwing out theories. Was it a prop from a lost movie? A genuine, historical artifact? As the fire died down to glowing embers, Alex got up with his headlamp, going to get the mask. Jordan Saget shaking his head. We waited, a knot of anxiety tightening in my stomach with every passing minute. When Alex finally stumbled back into the firelight, he was pale, and he was empty-handed. "I threw it in the pond," he whispered. We pressed him for why. It hummed," he said, his voice shaky. I swear, the eyes glowed. We tried to dismiss it, blaming it on exhaustion and the eerie woods. But none of us really slept that night. Every rustle of leaves, every snap of a twig sounded like something moving just beyond our tents. The next morning, Sunday, we packed up in record time and just got out of there. The long drive home was almost completely silent. Years have passed. Every now and then, I'll search for Willow Lake online, but all I ever find is generic info about the main park area. There's no mention of a cabin, no record of a strange bronze mask. It's like we wandered into a place that isn't on any map. But that elm, it still shows up in my nightmares sometimes. Those T-shaped slits, just staring out of the darkness. I think we dug up something that was meant to stay buried. Thanks for listening to my story. It's one I'll obviously never forget. If you have any creepy camping stories of your own, Alright, let me tell you about the weirdest job I ever had. These days, adult shops are all polished and welcoming, almost like boutiques. But back in the early 2000s, not so much. I ended up running one on the outskirts of Philadelphia, in this really run-down strip mall. We called it Eden's Secrets, a cheeky jab at the fancy, upscale competitor downtown. The place was a real trip. Our neighbors were a sloppy tattoo parlor, a smoke shop that was definitely selling more than just tobacco, a secondhand junk store full of supposedly haunted items, and, get this, a yarn boutique run by two very pious ladies. The funny part, every Wednesday, like clockwork, they'd sneak in and grab our wildest tapes, claiming they were performing moral surveillance. Right, so how did I end up there? Well, I'd just dropped out of college for a term, completely freaked out by the mountain of student loans I was facing. The job paid cash, and nobody asked any questions. It was perfect. When the owners hired me, they warned me that the place attracted some characters. Apparently, the person they tried to hire before me was, and I quote, too unhinged for our clientele. Let that sink in. Still, business was surprisingly good, and things were mostly uneventful. That is, until one slow, dragging Monday evening. The sun was setting, casting long shadows across the empty parking lot. Suddenly, the front door didn't just open, it exploded inward. The little bell that was supposed to chime was completely demolished. In stormed this absolute colossus of a man. He had to be close to 7 feet tall, all spindly and draped in a long, dark overcoat that looked way too warm for the season. He didn't say a word, just stalked up to the counter and slammed a wrinkled paper sack right on top of the register. He leaned in, his voice a low growl. Flawed goods. I want my cash back. Immediately. Now, the #1 rule of the shop was ironclad. Absolutely no exchanges or refunds. Period. But the way this guy was staring at me, it was like he was looking straight through me. I could feel my confidence evaporating. I managed to mutter, You're gonna have to show me what it is. He reached into the bag and pulled out a rubber suffocation veil. You know? The kind made of black latex with a tube leading to a little hand pump for... Well, you get the idea. We'd had one on display forever. But we just sold it a few days ago. The stitching is split, he snarled, pointing to a ragged tear near the seam. It didn't look like a normal tear, either. The edges were frayed and discolored, almost like they'd been eaten away by some kind of chemical. I tried to stick to the rules. I'm sorry, sir, but we can't do returns. That was the wrong thing to say. In a flash, his hand shot out and grabbed the front of my shirt. He was unbelievably strong for someone so thin. He slammed my head down onto the counter, my cheek pressed right against the cold surface, just inches from the little inflator bulb of the veil he'd brought back. He hissed right in my ear. You sell me junk, and then you refuse to pay for your mistake. You're going to compensate me or you're going to suffer. The pressure on my head increased, and I felt something hard and rigid digging into my temple from inside his coat. Was it a gun? A knife? Primera de no idea. And I wasn't about to find out. My heart was pounding in my chest. Okay, I stammered. You got it. Just let go. He eased up, and I scrambled to open the register, flinging $60 onto the counter way more than the thing was worth. And then the weirdest thing happened. His whole demeanor changed. He broke into this wide, almost gentle smile. Thank you so much, he said, his voice now surprisingly pleasant. I really appreciate your understanding. He carefully bagged the torn veil, turned, and just sauntered out of the shop as if nothing had happened. I was left there, shaking, trying to process what just went down. Later, I called the owners to tell them what happened. They just laughed. Oh, that was just stretch, Steve, one of them chuckled. Yeah, from now on, if he comes in, just give him a refund. No police, no security, nothing. In that plaza, you were on your own. It wasn't long after that I decided to quit and go back to school. Student loans suddenly seemed a lot less scary. And that torn veil, I have no doubt it's still out there somewhere, probably being used to give someone else the fright of their life. What a wild story. It was the summer of '82, and the Boston heat was unbearable. My buddies Tom, Rico, and I were desperate for a break from the city grind. Tom was pulling long shifts at a factory. Rico was flipping burgers, and I was stuck in a stuffy office as a temp clerk. A real vacation was out of the question. We were flat broke. So, we settled on the next best thing. Pine Ridge Woods, a sprawling, untamed forest, just 90 minutes outside the city. It felt like a world away. We arrived that Saturday around noon, driving until the paved roads turned to dirt. We found a perfect spot to set up camp by a secluded, babbling stream. The afternoon was pure bliss. We grilled steaks over an open fire, the smell mixing with the scent of pine and damp earth. As dusk settled, we cracked open a few beers and shared stories, laughing under a blanket of stars until the first light of dawn. It was exactly the escape we needed. Sunday, we decided to get a little more adventurous and bushwhack off the main trail. Rico, a geology nut, was busy collecting unusual stones, his pockets bulging with strange-colored rocks. Tom, Everett the conspiracy theorist, was going on and on about a recent string of UFO sightings in New England, pointing at the sky with dramatic flair. It was all good fun. Then, late in the afternoon, we stumbled into something strange. A dense, unnatural fog hung heavy in a small clearing, and in the center of that clearing stood a crumbling stone circle. It looked ancient, like the last remnants of a long-forgotten settlement. Moss-covered slabs, each the size of a small car, were arranged in a perfect ring. The ground in the middle was charred black, as if from countless fires long ago. Naturally, our curiosity got the better of us. We moved closer to inspect the stones. Carved into their surfaces were swirling, intricate symbols, so faded by time they were barely visible. They gave off a seriously eerie vibe. Rico reached out and traced one of the symbols with his finger. "Hey, this is warm," he said, pulling his hand back in surprise. That's when Tom called out. He'd been poking around the base of one of the largest stones and found a small, half-buried pouch. It was made of old, cracking leather. Inside, nestled in what looked like dried leaves, was a small whistle carved from bone. It was covered in the same kind of runic markings we saw on the stones. "Think it's some kind of native artifact?" I wondered aloud, taking it from him. It felt strangely heavy in my hand. Before Rico or I could object, Tom, always the impulsive one, put the whistle to his lips and blew. A low, haunting wail cut through the silence of the woods. It wasn't loud, but it echoed in a way that made the hairs on my arm stand up. A flock of birds burst from the nearby trees, scattering in a panic. A sudden, cold unease washed over all of us. This felt wrong. We quickly decided to pocket the whistle and head back to camp. As night fell, the forest felt different. The friendly crackle of our campfire wasn't as comforting as it had been the night before. A strange wind picked up, and with it came whispers faint. Indistinct voices that seemed to come from all around us, just at the edge of hearing. "It's just the wind," I tried to convince myself, and the others, but we all knew it wasn't. Then, Tom, in a moment of stupid bravado, pulled out the whistle again. "Let's see if we can get a response," he joked, and blew into it. The effect was immediate. The whispers intensified, no longer faint, but clear, circling our campsite. The shadows thrown by the firelight began to dance and twist in unnatural ways. Rico, his face pale, swore he could see figures moving just beyond the light, darting between the trees. That's when the panic set in. We kicked dirt over the fire, plunging our campsite into darkness, and scrambled into our tents, zipping them up as if that could offer any real protection. The whispers grew into a rhythmic chant, getting closer and closer. We huddled together in my tent, paralyzed by fear, listening to the disembodied voices and the sound of something heavy dragging through the underbrush just outside. We didn't sleep. A wink. When dawn finally broke, the woods were silent again. Eerily silent, we cautiously unzipped the tent. Everything looked normal, but the feeling of being watched was overwhelming. We checked Tom's pack. The whistle was gone. It had simply vanished. We didn't need any more convincing. We packed up in record time, practically throwing our gear into the car, and got the hell out of there, vowing never to speak of what happened. Over the decades, I've looked up Pine Ridge Woods. Official records and hiker forums only mention standard, well-marked trails. There's no mention of a stone circle, no reports of strange fogs or whispers in the wind. It's as if it was never there. But we know what we saw. That whistle didn't belong to us. It belonged to that place, and whatever we summoned with it that night. It was ancient, and it was hungry. Some places hold echoes, and some echoes never, ever fade. Thanks for tuning into our story. If you enjoyed diving into the unknown, be sure to like this video and hit that subscribe button. We have plenty more chilling tales to share. Until next time, stay safe out there.